Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really critical topic, Iran's nuclear program. We're looking at where things stand now. Late 2024, early 2025. We've gone through a lot of material, IAEA report analyses, news, expert views to kind of pull up the most important bits for you. No getting bogged down in excessive technical jargon. The goal is simple, a clear, concise picture of what's really going on.
Exactly. Our mission here is to get to the heart of it. What are the key things you need to know right now about, well, their enriched uranium stockpiles and their capacity for more enrichment? What about this risk of a fast nuclear breakout? And of course, where do things stand with the U.S. negotiations? It's a lot to unpack.
Okay, yeah, let's dive right into maybe the core issue first.
Yeah.
The enriched uranium itself. The latest IAEA data we have up to October 2024, it shows a pretty clear trend. Their total stockpile, it's climbed to 6,604.4 kilograms. And what's really important for you to grasp is that this isn't just low enriched stuff. The increases across the board. We're seeing more 2%, 5%, 20%, and crucially, that's 60% enriched uranium.
Right. And that 60% highly enriched uranium, the HEU, that's where things get, well, particularly sensitive. By October, Iran had 182.3 kilograms of it. Now, to give you some context, if that material was enriched just a bit further to 90%, many experts assess that's enough fissile material for multiple potential nuclear weapons. And they were adding to it, producing about 7.6 kilograms a month. So think about that rate. It's not just a number. It means the time they might need to reach a critical point is shrinking significantly.
And it's not just the 60%. The 20% stockpile, that's up too. Now at 839.2 kilograms. The IAEA itself has been pretty vocal, expressing concern. They point out Iran is the only country without nuclear weapons that's producing and stockpiling uranium enriched to such high levels. So what's the takeaway for you? It directly cuts down the time Iran could theoretically achieve a breakout.
Exactly. It's like having a head start in a race. The more uranium they possess, especially at these higher enrichment levels, the less work, the less time it takes to get to that 90% weapon grade level. It's like starting halfway up the ladder instead of at the bottom.
Okay, so that's the material. Let's shift to Iran's capacity to actually do the enriching. The centrifuges. The numbers here are quite large. They've got nearly 11,700 advanced centrifuges installed. That's across their Natanz and Fordo sites, though mostly at Natanz. And if you add in the older, less efficient IR-1s, the total installed count is around 19,000 centrifuges.
Yeah, and it's important for you to understand the difference between installed capacity and what's actually spinning and enriching. Their total installed potential is roughly 52,900 SWU per year. Now, SWU separative work unit sounds technical, but basically it measures how much enrichment work they can do. Their actual enriching capacity, what's currently operating, is closer to 31,400 SWU per year. And those advanced machines, they contribute the vast majority of that work. We've also seen them install 6 new cascades of the more efficient IR-2-meter centrifuges at Natanz recently, and there are plans for more of those.
But here's a really crucial piece of the puzzle, something that impacts how we understand all this. Transparency, or the lack of it. The IAEA has been quite open, saying they just can't verify the total number of centrifuges Iran has manufactured, or where they might be storing them, in places they haven't declared. Why is that a big deal for you? Yeah. It raises this nagging worry about, hidden capabilities, things that could be brought online quickly.
Exactly right. Without that complete picture from the IAEA, without knowing the full inventory of centrifuges Iran possesses, it's like trying to gauge an opponent's strength without knowing about their reserve forces. It makes assessing their true maximum enrichment potential very, very difficult. It adds a lot of uncertainty.
Which brings us squarely to that high-stakes question. Breakout potential.
Yeah.
Based on current analysis, using their existing stockpiles and the centrifuges we know about, Iran could, theoretically, produce enough weapon-grade uranium that's 90% enriched for almost 10 nuclear devices. And they could do that in just 1 month. That potential number climbs to maybe 16 devices within 5 months.
Yeah.
That's fast.
It is fast. And perhaps even more alarming for you to consider is how quickly they could potentially produce just one weapon's worth of material. If they used, say, a portion of that existing 60% HEU stockpile they already have and fed it into just a few cascades of their advanced centrifuges. Some expert assessments suggest they could produce the 25 kilograms or so of weapon-grade uranium needed for one bomb in maybe a week, possibly less. Think about that speed. A week or less. That kind of dash would be incredibly hard for the IAEA to detect promptly, especially if Iran delayed access for inspectors, even slightly. It's a sprint scenario, not a marathon.
Yeah, and it's not just about having the material. It's about the know-how, too. By continuing to produce 60% enriched uranium, Iran is gaining invaluable practical experience. They're learning the more complex steps needed to get to 90%, possibly finding shortcuts, mastering tricky things like transferring the uranium hexafluoride gas between cascades. It's like practicing the most difficult plays before the championship game.
That's a good analogy. And even if they didn't use the 60% stockpile as a starting point, if they started with their low-enriched uranium, the stuff below 5%, the estimated time to get enough weapon-grade material for one bomb is still quite short, maybe around 1.5 months. Starting from scratch with just natural uranium, that takes longer, about 5.5 months. But these timelines could shrink further, especially with those plans to install more advanced IR-6 centrifuges at Fordo.
Okay, let's pivot a bit to the political side, the negotiations, the diplomacy or lack thereof. The U.S. position, it seems pretty clear and consistent recently. They've stated they won't accept any level of uranium enrichment by Iran in a future deal. They see any enrichment as basically enabling a path to weapons.
Right. And from the Iranian side, their stance seems just as firm, just in the opposite direction. They view enrichment not just as a technical activity, but as a fundamental legal right under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. And also, it's a major source of national pride, a technological achievement. They've repeatedly said they'll continue enriching uranium whether there's a deal with the U.S. or not. It seems non-negotiable for them.
Yeah, it sounds like a real impasse. We've even seen reports of Iranian officials describing the back and forth of the U.S. as like a frustrating game of snakes and ladders. Their perception seems to be that the U.S. position keeps shifting. It's inconsistent, which, makes finding common ground incredibly hard.
Absolutely. And adding urgency to all this, for you to keep in mind, is a deadline, October 2025. That's when key provisions of the old JCPOA framework and UN Security Council Resolution 2231 expire. This opens the door to a potential snapback of UN sanctions against Iran and Iran's response. They've warned very clearly that if those UN sanctions snap back, they would formally withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty altogether. That would be a huge blow to the global non-proliferation regime. Major consequences.
And it's not just diplomatic posturing, is it? We're seeing more public discussion inside Iran about potentially building nuclear weapons. There are reports indicating some parliament members have openly called for it, some even suggesting timelines like less than 6 months if the supreme leader gave the order. And the Geiger counter report we looked at also highlights this. It points to increased capability, yes, but also a perceived increase in, the willingness to consider weaponization.
It's interesting, too, that this internal debate is happening while Iran's regional allies, their proxy forces, have reportedly faced some significant setbacks. Some analysts speculate these military difficulties might be sort of influencing Iran's strategic thinking about the value of a nuclear deterrent. It just adds another layer of complexity, another variable in their calculation.
There was that development back in November 2024, right? Iran reportedly agreed to pause further expansion of its 60% HEU stockpile, which sounds like a positive step initially.
It did, but there was a big string attached. That agreement was contingent. It depended on the IAEA's Board of Governors not passing any new resolution critical of Iran. So it really shows how fragile these things are. A potential de-escalation step, but one that could be reversed very quickly based on political moves elsewhere.
Okay, let's circle back to that issue of transparency, the monitoring, because it seems critical. The IAEA keeps raising serious concerns. They talk about limited access, not getting enough information on key things like centrifuge production or heavy water inventories. They've used this quite stark phrase, loss of continuity of knowledge. What should you, the listener, take away from that phrase? It means that the inspectors are losing the baseline. They can't be sure what's happening in some key areas.
That loss of continuity is incredibly important in the world of nuclear safeguards. It means the IAEA can no longer guarantee that they know the starting point for certain nuclear materials or activities within Iran. If you don't know the starting point, it becomes much, much harder to detect if any material has been secretly diverted later on. It's like trying to balance a checkbook when you don't know the opening balance. You can't be sure if everything adds up.
And compounding that challenge, Iran hasn't allowed some experienced IAEA inspectors back into the country, which naturally further hampers the agency's ability to do its verification job effectively. Plus, there's this unresolved issue about transfers of that 20% and 60% enriched uranium to a facility in Isfahan. The IAEA hasn't received updated declarations about those stocks, which raises flags about, potential JCPOA compliance issues and just a general risk of having that sensitive material maybe less accounted for.
Absolutely. Having significant quantities of near weapon-grade material, like 60% HEU, at a place like the Isfahan plant without full, continuous, transparent monitoring, That's a major proliferation concern for the international community. It really underscores why robust verification is so essential.
So finally, let's touch on that April 2025 Geiger Counter Report assessment. It paints a pretty sobering picture, doesn't it? It assigned an overall threat level of extreme danger. And the reason cited, it's that combination of increased technical capability, those shorter potential timelines to weaponization we discussed, and also those internal signals, the discussions within Iran about possibly pursuing nuclear weapons. This isn't just rhetoric. It's a considered assessment based on trends.
Yeah, and looking inside that report, it's interesting how they scored the different risk factors. Nuclear breakout potential scored the highest, right at the top. But hostile rhetoric and sensitive nuclear capabilities were also rated extremely high. And significantly, the category beyond breakout, building nuclear weapons, was also rated at extreme danger. This suggests a perception among those analysts that Iran might be accelerating preparations for actual weaponization steps should the decision be made. The report explicitly links this to the context, too. Those setbacks for Iran's regional proxies, the general instability, it sees those as potential influencing factors.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, the key takeaways seem pretty stark. Iran's stockpiles of enriched uranium, especially that very sensitive 60% material, have grown significantly. At the same time, their centrifuge technology has advanced. And the combination means the potential time they'd need for a nuclear breakout to dash towards producing weapon-grade uranium has shrunk dramatically.
Right. And layered on top of that technical reality is this persistent lack of transparency with the IAEA monitors and these fundamental, maybe irreconcilable disagreements with the U.S. over whether Iran should be enriching uranium at all. It all adds up to a very complex, very volatile situation moving forward.
For me, the real sort of aha moment, the thing that really hits home, is just how fast things could potentially move.
Yeah.
That theoretical capability to produce a significant amount of weapon-grade uranium so quickly, that compressed timeline is, I think, the critical element for you, our listener, to understand. It really changes the stakes and the urgency.
And it naturally raises some big questions for you to ponder. What happens when those JCPOA and UN resolution deadlines hit in late 2025? What are their real implications? How might the ongoing and possibly worsening instability in the Middle East influence Tehran's nuclear choices? And fundamentally, are the current international monitoring and verification tools actually enough, given how fast Iran's program seems to be advancing?
Yeah, it leaves us with a pretty challenging thought, doesn't it? Given everything we've discussed, the capabilities, the politics, the lack of transparency, what are the most likely ways this could play out? And maybe more importantly, what are the absolute key factors, the tipping points, that will shape the future of Iran's nuclear program and, consequently, the stability of the entire region? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.